Welcome to Basic Brewing Radio for Thursday, September 15th. I'm James Spencer. Here at Basic Brewing Radio, we're all about home brewing, making beer at home. Well, this week it's our sanitation show. Steve Wilkes joins me to talk about sanitizing brewing equipment and to go over the input from some of our listeners. And speaking of which, I want to say howdy to a few folks before we get started. You may remember Sam in Urbana, Illinois wrote in last time to ask about good mead resources, and Will from Warren answered the call. And I'm not sure if that's Warren, Arkansas. He didn't say, and I forgot to ask, so sorry about that, Will. Will sent us a link to a site he uses for mead info and recipes, and we appreciate that. Also, Sam himself wrote back in with a couple links of his own that he had found. You can find all that information in the description of this episode at basicbrewingradio.com. Also, we heard from a listener on the other side of the world. Greg wrote in from Hamilton, New Zealand to say he enjoys the show and that he's going to have to try Gerard Lemon's method of dry hopping that he introduced to us in this past week's show. It's pretty incredible, this podcasting stuff. I can stand here in my little studio in Northwest Arkansas and talk to home brewers around the globe without hardly raising my voice. And finally, Jay from Salem, Oregon wrote in to say he's been driving around listening to episodes of our podcast, and these days that's an expensive proposition, Jay. Jay wrote in after Steve and I recorded this week's episode to say he uses straight A for sanitizing. It's an oxidizer, and he has good luck with it. And I just wanted to get that in there since Jay wrote in after Steve and I recorded this week's show. So straight A. It's an oxidizer, and Jay likes it. So there you go. Add that to the list, to the long list that we're going to have here in just a few minutes. And I just wanted to say I certainly appreciate everybody who writes in. It makes my day every time I get a note from a listener, and I realize it takes time to correspond, so I appreciate the time, and I appreciate the time that you take to listen. Well, you may remember a few weeks back, Andy in Chicago wrote in to suggest we do a show on sanitation, or sanitization. Well, Andy, this show's for you. And as the bugs and birds chirped in the background, I joined my buddy Steve Wilkes at his house one recent morning to talk about the topic. Steve Wilkes.
James Spencer.
Welcome to the show. This is your second podcast. The first podcast was talking about mead on my porch.
Yep.
Now we're talking about sanitation on your porch.
That's right, and thank you for having me back.
Well, thanks for being here. Is this a porch, or is it a deck, or is it a patio?
I call it a deck.
A deck.
Since there's wood involved.
Oh, well, that's of course my porch is wood.
That's true. I think in the south it's a porch, and in the north it's a deck, and I don't know.
Where is it a stoop?
In New Orleans, which unfortunately we have some sadness there.
Well, yeah, and a couple podcasts ago I mentioned, on a serious note, that if you haven't done so already, you need to give to the effort down there, either through redcross.org or through the Salvation Army or through... You are arranging, you're a musician.
That's right.
And you are arranging a benefit, a local benefit for jazz musicians in New Orleans who were displaced or hurt by the storm.
We sure are. We're going to hold a benefit concert. We're calling it the Concert for New Orleans Jazz. We're negotiating with our local arts center, the Walton Arts Center, to find the right date for that to happen. And we've pulled together a sextet of the finest jazz musicians in this area in Northwest Arkansas. Very good players. And we're going to celebrate. We're going to mourn the tragedy, but celebrate the spirit of New Orleans jazz, and in the process raise some much needed money to go directly to musicians who have lost their livelihood. They've lost the place to play. Mm-hmm. They've lost their instruments. Of course, like so many, they've lost their homes. We can't do a lot. We can't solve a lot of problems, but we might solve one or two for one or two people, and that's what we're trying to do. And we hope that if everyone in the country will take that attitude, that I can't solve this whole ocean of need. I can't drain that whole problem, but I can drain a little bit of that problem. I can fix a little bit of that. And if we all do that, then we can't remove the heartache that is there, but we can help it to heal.
Right.
So,
and if they want to hear or they want to read more, can they go to cbursantrio.com?
Yes, that's right. Our website is the Claudia Burson Trio is the rhythm section for this. It's the trio that I play in, and www.cbursantrio.com, and we'll have information up about the concert very soon, as soon as we've got the dates and everything nailed down.
And maybe an address if people out there want to contribute to the cause as well.
Absolutely. We'll have links to the charities that are involved, and it's just
and just a very good effort. And I didn't mean to segue into that, but
no.
It's appropriate, and I think it's important to say, because a lot of times really good musicians don't have the big contracts, and they're living from gig to gig.
Literally, no insurance. There's no 401k plans for guys that play in nightclubs. I mean, it's just not there. The support network that most of us enjoy, who work, kind of regular jobs for regular companies, and these guys go out there every day, and many of them play literally for tips. I mean, that's literally how they make their living. And in good times in New Orleans, which there have been, you can make a living doing that. But when tragedy strikes, there's no safety net for you. And so our hearts just went out to them as fellow musicians, and we're hopeful that we'll be able to make their lives a little bit better in the coming months. And we feel that it's as important to restore the cultural identity and the cultural spirit of New Orleans as it is the roads and bridges, because ultimately, when you think of New Orleans, you don't think about the I-10 bridge or whatever it is. You think about New Orleans jazz and Louis Armstrong and Café du Monde and Café Sabisi and all of those places. And so we want to do what we can to restore that spirit too. So thank you very much, James, for letting me have a minute or two of your podcast for this.
It's no problem. And I appreciate your being with us today.
Thank you.
Because the reason that I wanted to do the show on sanitation, which is our topic today, I don't know if I mentioned that, but sanitation, the reason I wanted to do it in this format is because you and I primarily use iota-4 for sanitation, and we also use bleach on occasion.
Right.
But there are other products and other methods out there that you can use to sanitize your stuff, and I wanted to talk about those, but I didn't have the expertise, and you didn't have the expertise.
Right.
But so I wanted to throw the topic open to the floor and have people write in. And
it's a forum.
It's a forum, or a fivum,
or a fivum, something like that.
So let's talk in generalities, Steve. Why do you sanitize, and when is it important to sanitize in the process?
Okay. Well, before you can sanitize, you have to clean. So we have to establish that. All of your equipment, all of your bottles, all of the things that you stir your wort with, and your brew bucket and the boil bucket and your fermenter, and all of those things have to be clean, physically clean. There can't be junk on the sides of them, and old trube that's dried up, and who knows? I mean, it seems so obvious, and yet, some people may not really understand the level of cleanliness that is necessary. You can do a lot of things differently in home brewing. You can vary the temperature of the mash by 1 degree in the direction or another, and it won't ruin your beer. It might change it a little bit, but it won't ruin it. But if your stuff isn't clean and then sanitized, it will ruin your beer, and you'll have to send it down to the drain.
And it's important to sanitize after the boil.
After the boil is when it's so important, and in fact, that's really the point of it.
Yeah,
because
it's not important. You don't have to sanitize your brew pot,
no,
or the stirring spoon that you use when stirring your wort. You don't even really have to sanitize things before the boil. It's not as essential as you sanitize it. If your mash tun and your lauter tun, if you're doing an all-grain brew, you need to have them clean because you don't want off flavors from previous batches or stuff that's growing in there. But it's essential that you sanitize stuff after you've cooled down the beer after the boil.
Right.
So, one thing that you can use as a good sanitizer before we get into the products is heat.
Yep, it's a good one.
And we're talking about boiling before we were kind of on the air. And you were saying that you boil some things in water to sanitize them. And I've talked to a craft brewer who says that he was setting up a new brew pub and wanted to make sure that his equipment was all sanitized and ready to go, so he forced boiling water through all of the pipes and all the stuff in his brewery, because the heat in the boiling water, it not only sanitizes the stuff that it touches, the heat tends to radiate through the equipment and kill the bugs that are in the nooks and crannies that he couldn't necessarily get to. So heat is a good sanitizer, and when you boil your wort for an hour, you're getting the good stuff from the hops, and you're also, I guess, in that case, you are sterilizing your wort.
Yep.
So what's the difference between sanitizing something and sterilizing?
Well, sterilizing means literally that it's sterile. There's nothing living. It's like an operating room. It's completely void of contaminants, microbial contaminants, bacterial contaminants. Sanitizing is a somewhat lower level of that. So the idea is not that you have to eliminate every possible. You don't have to have a clean room like you're going to send a satellite into space, you know. But what you want to do when you sanitize is you want to make sure that you've eliminated most of the wild yeast, most of the bacteria that's just in the air, so that the yeast has an opportunity when it comes in contact with the wort, the good yeast, the stuff that you want your beer to taste like, can take over, can have a strong fermentation period, and should anything get in there, that it will overwhelm it, you might say. So you just want to eliminate the opportunity for the bad critters to take over.
Yeah, because the bad critters give your beer off flavors that you don't want. I mean, hopefully if you're designing your beer, if you're taking a beer and you're making a particular style, you're choosing a particular strain of yeast that has certain flavors to it.
It has certain characteristics.
And that's what you want in your beer. You don't want the wild yeast that's come off the dog to be in your beer.
Tastes like Shepherd.
It's a German beer.
It's a German beer. Should have named that dog Pilsner.
So there you go. You're doing it. And one thing, also before we get into the products, one thing that you can do to help out your yeast is to pitch it in a strong enough amount.
Right.
And if you do a starter, some people say starters are essential. And that is, if you make a little beer beforehand, my starter that I make is a quart of water and a half cup of light dry malt extract. You boil that just like a beer. You cool it down to 70, 72 degrees, somewhere around there. Yep. And then you pitch the yeast that you've got in there, and then put that in a sanitized container with an airlock, just like you would do a beer. And it goes through a little fermentation, and it increases the amount of yeast, so that when you do pitch, the lag time between pitching and active fermentation is diminished. So there's a lot less time for any nasty bugs in there to establish a foothold in your beer and to affect the taste of it. So one thing that you can help in making sure that your beer is good, in addition to good sanitation practices, make a starter. It's not that hard to do. And you can help ensure that your yeast has the opportunity to do its job well.
Yep.
So, are we ready to talk about products?
Yeah, let's do.
Let's start off with bleach. Now, sanitation is a controversial topic.
It is. And there have been riots in the streets over this.
Figuratively. But there is people, you ask different people what they use, and some people are adamant that what they do is the only way to do it. And I've talked to people, we have a homebrew video that you and I did together, and I'm selling it in homebrew stores across the country and talking to these people, and some say do not use bleach. And you talk to the next guy and he says, I use bleach. So take all this information, use it that in the way that you're comfortable with in your home brewing environment, and hopefully you'll have good beer. But let's start out with Bob from St. Louis, Missouri. He says, my girlfriend Pam and I have been home brewing for a little over a year now, and we both enjoy your show, usually while brewing or bottling a batch of ale. Thanks, Bob and Pam.
Yeah.
After 30 successful 5-gallon batches of pale ales, stouts, and wheat beers, we've yet to experience any contamination. I learned everything about sanitizing our equipment and keeping the evil, invisible critters from spoiling our beer from the joy of home brewing by Charlie Papazian. And we started with that as well.
That's right. I keep it next to my bed at night, which is actually true.
It makes a good coaster.
Well,
no, it's a good book and good, and it's been recently revised, by the way. A simple solution of household bleach is the most affordable, practical, and effective sanitizer. We soak our equipment in 1 teaspoon of bleach added to 5 gallons of water for 30 to 60 minutes and rinse with hot tap water immediately before use. A stronger solution of 1 tablespoon of bleach per 5 gallons is ideal for soaking items overnight to thoroughly clean excessively dirty items such as glass carboys that we use as fermenters. When it comes to bottling, we fill a large cooler with a stronger solution and soak the bottles overnight. So Bob mentions rinsing with bleach.
Very important. You've got to rinse bleach because your beer will taste like bleach.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are rinse solutions and there are no rinse solutions.
Right.
Bleach is a rinse solution. It's a good sanitizer, but you do have to make sure that you rinse your equipment thoroughly afterwards.
So bleach is really a pretty labor-intensive cleaner. So there's a trade-off. It's cheap.
Yeah. And readily accessible.
Readily accessible, but there's a little more work involved and a little less room for error, you might say. I mean, if you don't soak it, if you don't have your solution the right strength, if you don't soak it long enough, there's some variables that you have to pay attention to. That said, I mean, it's pretty simple.
Yeah. Bob continues with a good tip. It helps if you rinse the bottles out right after decanting the beer into a glass and even keeping them in a cooler of sanitizing solution until next bottling. When it's time to bottle, just drain the cooler and the bottles and give them each a blast of hot water, again rinsing, using a jet bottle washer and drain. I do use a no-rinse sanitizer, one-step powder, which is an oxygen-based product that we'll talk about later on, occasionally to sanitize items quickly if I've forgotten to soak them long enough in the weak bleach solution. The only disadvantage of using a one-step product is the cost, about $2.50 per 16 gallons. That's $2.50. After all, one of the attractions of home brewing is saving money, not to mention the best-tasting beer you can find anywhere.
And he ends that with an exclamation point.
Yes. So thanks, Bob and Pam from St. Louis. I think you and I use bleach for the same purpose.
Yeah, I use it pretty much to soak and sanitize my fermenting bucket, my pail. And so when I get ready to make a batch of beer, I'll fill it up with cool tap water, put in my tablespoon approximately of bleach, and I'll let it set overnight. I may let it sit for a few hours. I don't necessarily leave it overnight. And then, as I'm kind of approaching that during the boil, I'll dump it out and rinse it out and go forward. I don't use it for my accoutrements, for the paddles and all of that. But you wouldn't want to soak your accoutrements in.
Yeah, your that's for the delicate cycle.
That's right.
Okay, and now on to, you think we've covered bleach well?
I think so.
Yeah.
Maybe enough.
I think, now let's move on to iodophor. And we got a few responses in endorsing iodophor. Do you want to read Brendan from Tulsa?
Yeah, Brendan from Tulsa, my wife's hometown. Brendan from Tulsa writes, I have been homebrewing for about a year now. I stumbled upon your show / podcast from a post on HBD. What does HBD stand for?
It is I believe it is a website, like a discussion group.
Okay. I've heard 3 shows now, and I just wanted to acknowledge you and thank you for distributing a high-quality product. I look forward to future shows. Thank you, Brendan.
Yeah, thanks.
By the way, I am all about BTF iodophor. It's inexpensive, easy to mix, and you can judge appropriate concentration just by looking at the color. I was worried about the taste and smell of iodophor, so I taste tested it in a split batch. I kegged 3. This is great.
Mm-hmm.
I kegged 3 gallons after sanitizing with the powdered one-step stuff, and 3 gallons in another keg sanitized with iodophor. I also added 2 tablespoons of slightly stronger than necessary, about 20 parts per million strength solution. Both kegs were force carbonated and sat for 14 days in the fridge. I had 6 people blind taste test the samples, and no one reported any distinguishing taste or odor. 32-ounce bottle for $20 will make about 1 jillion gallons of solution.
That may be a slight exaggeration.
Well, 1 jillion. It can't be beat, Brendan says.
So there you go.
There you go.
I have also heard critics of iodophor saying that it will taint the taste of your beer no matter how weak the solution or how you use it or whatever. Here's a guy, Brendan in Tulsa, who has done a taste test.
Mm-hmm.
Sounds pretty scientific to me, and it proves what you and I have been brewing for like 9 years, right?
Yeah.
We've always used iodophor and have good beer.
Always had good beer. Except for that batch in 98. It was, I call it the kegger of 98.
Well,
It put a whole new meaning into the word stout. I'm kidding.
Okay.
All right. So
Casey from Siloam Springs, who's a longtime fan of the show, and we've been corresponding back and forth. Siloam Springs is I think my mother-in-law's hometown. So there you go. Siloam Springs is in northwest Arkansas, not far from here.
The diamond of Benton County.
Is it?
That's what they say.
Well, there you go. I started out using, Casey says, I started out using bleach solution, and I do think that is a pretty effective method, but I didn't really like spending much time with bleach on my hands, which could be an issue.
Yeah, absolutely.
I have switched to iodophor, 10 to 15 minutes contact time, and have been pleased with the results. I rinse everything with boiled tap water after the iodophor soak. I know iodophor is supposed to not need rinsing, but I figure the little bit of extra work pays off in peace of mind. And isn't that what it's all about? Peace of mind and enjoying your beer and enjoying the process. Yeah. So Casey goes beyond what is recommended and required for the product.
Mm-hmm.
I've read that you only have to soak for a couple of minutes in iodophor. He soaks for 10 to 15 minutes and rinses, which you don't really need to do. But like I say, if it makes Casey feel like he's doing a better job, then that's great.
Yep.
And I'm sure that Casey makes good beer.
I'm sure he does. And I'm not advocating or pitching for iodophor, but it's the stuff that they sell to restaurants and bars for their bar service. I mean, it's one of the products available, and you wash your margarita glass really fast, and then you dip it in the iodophor and you set it up on the counter and let it air dry, and that's what it's for. Now, I'm not sure that you'd have time in a bar to really scrutinize the taste of whatever it is that you're drinking, but that's the point of iodophor, and homebrewers have adopted it into our use.
And professional brewers use it too. Like
well, sure.
At the local brew pub, that's what Chris Milam uses
to
sanitize
that's right.
his stuff.
Okay.
So there you go. Thanks, Casey. And Nathan from Madison, Wisconsin.
Nathan writes, I use iodophor because it is cheap and no rinse. I fill an old cooler with 5 gallons of water and add 2 caps of iodophor. I find the longer cooler makes it easy to sanitize racking canes along with all my other equipment.
Good tip.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm on my 7th batch, 5th batch of all grain. Thanks to Casey from Siloam Springs, Arkansas, to pointing me to your show.
There you go. So Casey, spreading the word.
Spreading the word.
So it's a good tip from Nathan. The racking canes, it's kind of hard to bend them to put them in the sink. They're made out of the stiff plastic. So a good tip from him with the long cooler, so he could submerge the whole thing. I kind of do a half and half thing with the racking canes. I, sanitize half on one end and then take it out of the solution and sanitize on the other half. And then you and I were talking earlier about we siphon the sanitizing solution through the racking cane.
Yeah.
To into another container that we're also sanitizing to help get the boogers out of that stuff. So.
Yeah.
Okay, another product. Moving on. Is Star Sand from 5 Star Chemicals, and Paul from Centerport, Long Island, New York. Says, really enjoy your podcast. They've all been very informative. Thanks, Paul. Adding my 2 cents to the sanitation, or he says, he says sanitization.
Sanitization.
And I say sanitation just because it's easier to say.
Less effort.
So it's what it's all about. You see why I don't say sanitization more often. I've been a home brewer for 3 years and have been getting good results using the 5 Star Home Brewers cleaning kits. These include a cleaner, powdered brewery wash, or PBW, and a sanitizer, Star Sand. I haven't ruined a batch yet, knock wood. Thank you for your podcast. Knock the Book of Wine.
Not the Book of Wine.
Thank you for your podcasts and website. So thanks, Paul, from New York.
And didn't you have a discussion with the owner or the founder of Star Sand?
I did, and we'll talk about that in a minute.
Great.
Because there are a couple of questions that arise, and I had to ask him how to answer those.
All right.
Our next question, or our next input is a guest celebrity input from Jeff Bearer from Craft Beer Radio.
Celebrity audio input.
That's right, celebrity audio input.
CAI.
New on
the CAI Broadcasting Network.
New on CBS, right after CSI. Anyway, here's what Jeff Bearer has to say from Craft Beer Radio.
Hello, this is Jeff Bearer from Craft Beer Radio. I find that some people are over-paranoid about sanitation. I have found that as long as you are moderately careful about sanitation, you have little risk of infection. I use Star Sand from 5 Star to sanitize my equipment. It's a no-rinse sanitizer, but I usually rinse the equipment with tap water since I'm not patient enough to let all the foam from the Star Sand air dry. Also keep in mind that cleanliness is important in sanitation. If you have dirty equipment, that'll add off flavors to your beer just as much as anything else. I use powdered brewery wash, also from 5 Star, as my cleanser. Thanks, James. I really enjoy your podcast. Keep up the good work.
All right. Thanks, Jeff. And I want to, first of all, thanks, Jeff, for the kind comments about our show. And I want to pass along kind comments about Jeff's show, Jeff and Greg at craftbeerradio.com. If you enjoy good craft beers, then you'll enjoy their show. And I recommend that you go and check them out. I listen to their show every week myself. Jeff said that, he said some people are over-paranoid about sanitation. What's your take on that, Steve?
Well, I think that that can be true. But the way that I feel about it is that if you have a sound system, in other words, if you're using the product that you're using, whether it's bleach or iodophor or Star Sand, doesn't matter. If you're using it according to the manufacturer's instructions, if you're following the practice of good cleanliness, and you soak the things the proper amount of time, so on and so forth, then you have nothing to worry about. Mm-hmm. I think that the fretting comes when, in the back of your mind you think, I really didn't soak that quite right, or I'm not really sure if I washed that paddle when I put it in there. And then you have to wait your 2 weeks or your month or however long you're letting your beer sit in the bottle before you know. Mm-hmm. So that's when the worry comes in. If you just do it right up front and just follow those very easy steps, make everything clean, use the product appropriately, you have nothing to worry about.
Yeah. But if you're going to be over paranoid about any step during the brewing process,
this is the one.
Sanitation would be the one. I mean, just like Casey in Siloam Springs, he uses the no-rinse sanitizer, and then he rinses.
Yeah, with boiled water.
If that makes Casey feel better, that's
more
what
power
it's all
to him.
about.
Yeah.
Relax and have a homebrew, just like Charlie Papazian says. So
that's right.
All right, thanks, Jeff, again for your good comments. And Don Osborne from, and I used his last name for a purpose. I usually don't use last names, but just like Jeff Bearer, I'm using Don Osborne from St. Paul, Minnesota. So you want to take Don's comment?
Sure. Don says that he's been brewing for 4.5 years. As for sanitation products, like many people, I started with one step. It's what my homebrew store suggested, and it certainly is easy. However, over time I learned that although it worked fine for my brewing, it is not technically a sanitizer.
It's more of a cleanser.
More of a cleanser. I next moved to Star San, which is technically a sanitizer. As anyone who uses Star San will find out, it creates some foam. This causes many brewers concern, but there really isn't anything to fear. Any foam that remains in a carboy or keg will not affect the flavor of the beer in any way. The thing I like about Star San The thing I like about Star San, in addition to feeling more confident in its sanitizing ability, is the fact that it can be stored and reused many times over. I store mine in a 5-gallon carboy and use it probably 6 to 8 times before dumping. While Star San might cost more at the outset, I believe its ability to be reused actually lowers the per cost use. Makes sense. Also, unlike some other sanitizing options, Star San is a no-rinse, like One Step, which makes it convenient. Keep up the good work and happy brewing, Don Osborne.
And the reason that I used his last name is because he has a good website with some homebrewing tips on there, and I'll post a link to that on our site, but it's donosborne.com.
Mm-hmm.
And his site has his brew log, basic brewing tips, travel logs, and other stuff. So it's a good site, and pictures and everything. So I'll put a link to our site. Now, as I said at the outset, you and I don't have experience with Star San.
I've not used it.
So, but I knew that it was out there, and I knew that lots of people were using it, so I wanted to get comments from people about different products. Now, Jeff from Craft Beer Radio says that he's not patient enough to let the foam air dry, so he rinses. And Don Osborne says that there is foam, but he racks his beer on top of the foam. And he reuses the Star San. So I was curious, is this the proper way? I've never used Star San. I was curious, is this the proper way to use the product? So I called him. I called 5 Star Chemicals, and you can go to their site at 5starchemicals.com. You can write, it's all spelled out. Mm-hmm. I called there and said I had some questions about Star San. They connected me with Charlie Talley, who's the president of 5 Star.
There you go.
Power of the press. You get straight to the top.
Straight to the top.
Charlie Talley, president of 5 Star. He says he's also the chemist. He said use whichever title is appropriate, so I'll use both. They're in Commerce City, Colorado, which is out by Denver.
Yeah.
You're from Colorado.
Colorado Springs.
Charlie says, on the issue of reusing Star San, he says that the EPA requires him to say that any sanitizer must be made up fresh and discarded after each use.
Sounds reasonable.
That's what the government requires him to put on the label.
Gotcha.
He says, however, unofficially, the product can be reused. It will kill in the presence of dirt, wine, beer, etc. The foaming action will coat the inside of the carboy and sanitize it, even though all the beer might not have been removed. So he's required by law to say that you've got to throw it away after each use, but wink, wink, nudge, nudge, it'll still work.
What does he say about the foam?
On the foam, he says drain as much as you possibly can out of the carboy, but any residual foam is safe for use according to the EPA. Star San is based on food-grade ingredients, and the recommended use, I think, is 1 ounce in 5 gallons. So you think about that dilution. And they've also, on their website, they have a material safety data sheet, and it's the hazardous ingredients in Star San are phosphoric acid, 75%, or 50, ignore the percentages. I don't know how to read this. Phosphoric acid, dodecylbenzene sulfonic acid, and isopropyl alcohol. So that sounds like it'll kill just about anything.
I'd say.
But, if you don't want to drink it straight out of the bottle.
But in the right concentration.
In the right concentration, and if there's just some residue from the foam, I guess, left in your carboy, then, if you rack your beer on top of that, not going to hurt you.
Yeah.
So
that has a lot of appeal to me. I think I'll probably give this product a try because cleaning the carboy is a royal pain. It's heavy, and I take it and I put it on the hot jet, in your sink, and I'm trying to hold this 5-gallon or 7-gallon glass thing up. And
it's not a thing for people with back problems.
No, it's not.
And
it'll cause back problems.
Yeah. Luckily, Charlie Talley said that he was going to send me some. He says, "Have you ever used the product?" And I said, "No." He said, "Well, I'll send you some." So he's going to send me some samples, and he's got other brewing products that they also use, and he's going to send me some.
Yeah.
So we can try it out.
That sounds great.
So, and I told him that later on we could do a show on 5-star chemicals.
We'll do a review
and stuff. Yeah.
Great.
So we'll have him on in the future. So the last email is from Larry is that Leominster, Massachusetts? Do you think?
It's close enough for me.
Yeah. I apologize, Larry, if the Southerner here has massacred the name of your town, but. Larry says one topic for the sanitation show would be to discuss the differences between acid-based, which would be Star San, and oxygen-based sanitation products. I also make cider and found that the oxygen-based products, he says he used a product called Biosan, stripped the galvanized coating off the flipper top of my Easy Cap bottle, leaving them with nasty white powdery coating. I later found out that I should have been using the acid-based product. Knowing when to use one product over the other would be a good topic and would have saved me from buying all new caps.
Dave Miller has a book called The Home Brewing Guide, Everything You Need to Know About Making Great Tasting Beer. And he has a good discussion of that.
Really?
Yeah, he has a great discussion, 3 or 4 pages, about that exact topic, about
which to use where,
and why, and what they, what metals are affected by this, and what metal, when to decide. So check out that.
Yeah, on the instructions for a Star San, I believe it says you're not supposed to use it with soft metal because it's an acid.
Yeah, I would.
So anyway, you might want to check. We've only got so much time on the show, so. We appreciate the input from Larry. Also, he says November 5th and 6th is the 11th annual Cider Day, and you can go to ciderday.org, the annual Cider Day Festival in Western Massachusetts. It's not quite beer, but then again, I enjoyed the mead show very much, which is thanks in part to you, Steve.
Yeah.
May make an interesting topic.
I think it would.
It would.
Yeah.
Just so long as we get good cider. You and I both have had bad experiences with nasty cider that we bought from the store.
Yeah.
Not as good. Anyway. So talking about Biosan in one step, and I got this off of a couple of websites that sell the stuff. Biosan is a no-rinse sanitizer for brewing and winemaking equipment. It is a tasteless, odorless, eco-friendly, non-toxic, biodegradable sterilizer. They say sterilizer. I don't know about that. It is 3 times stronger than sulfite, but it contains no sulfite, soaps, or phosphates. It contains hydrogen peroxide, disodium salt, magnesium sulfate. So that's Biosan, which nobody wrote in about except for Larry. And he said he didn't like it because it ruined his easy flip cap thingies. And also, Biosan and One Step are both oxygen-based products.
Right.
And One Step is advertised as a cleanser with some sanitizing value. So I don't know that I would trust One Step as a sanitizer.
Right.
Sounds like it's a good cleanser, but I don't know about sanitizing.
Well, this was all very interesting stuff.
Yeah, I appreciate everybody that wrote in and everybody who listens to the show. I'm grateful that you spend time to listen to us and our experts, and hopefully, as I say, hopefully we will all wind up better home brewers at the end of it for sharing all the knowledge.
Yeah.
So that's sanitation or sanitization
or something like that.
Something like that. So I hope that everybody's gotten some good information. Have you learned something today, Steve?
I have. I'm looking forward to trying Star San, and I just think this is a great discussion to have with all the home brewers out there, and I look forward to making even better beer than I have in the past.
There you go. And I want to thank Steve again for helping out this week. One thing that we didn't talk about but planned to was using the dishwasher to sanitize bottles. Steve Steve and I use the dishwasher with no soap, with high heat settings, including heat in the drying cycle, no air drying. The bottles have to be clean going in, of course, and they come out way too hot to handle, so you want to be careful. Also, I let them cool upside down in the rack, the way I put them in there, before I fill them with beer. The reason I do that is I want to make sure that the heat in the bottles doesn't kill the yeast in the beer. Now, one caution, some say the use of a rinsing agent may hurt head retention. So if you find that you have an issue with head retention and you're using the dishwasher to sanitize, you might look there. I haven't had a problem with it myself, and it's much cleaner, or much easier, rather, than running the bottles through iodophor and letting them drain. So, just an extra added bonus tip. Well, next week we look ahead to the Great American Beer Festival, so you want to tune in for that. Well, if you have brewing questions, show suggestions, or just want to say hey, write to james@basicbrewing.com, or just fill out the contact form on basicbrewing.com. Don't forget to tell us where you're from. And while you're on our site, you can check out our DVD, Basic Brewing, Introduction to Extract Home Brewing. You can see a listing of the fine folks across the country who sell our DVD, and if there isn't a vendor in your area, you can order it from us online. Well, that's all until next week. Until then, thanks for listening. I'm James Spencer. Production help for Basic Brewing Radio and our website is provided by Kelly Dodson. Basic Brewing Radio is a production of Active Voicing. We'll talk to you next time. So long.